Well, good morning, and thank you for joining us on this fine day. We are in week number 14 of a 16-week program, so we are coming close to the end. This Wednesday, we have a couple of things due. I will brief you on them at first. The Module 5 assignment, the current events assignment, is on climate change and ocean life. You can see where I put in bold, think coral bleaching. When we were talking about coral, we talked about how the zooxanthellae in the coral could not tolerate the warming temperatures, the warming trend, and this is leading to coral bleaching. So that's like a little idea you can look at when you're looking at climate change and ocean life. Extension of tropical species, effects of the storms on ocean life, the increased hurricane activity, things along those lines. The climate change in the coral reefs, like climate bleaching, coral bleaching, things along those lines. So you're to locate two articles based in the changing temperatures and how it's affecting ocean life. So that is the current events assignment. You also have the unit quiz. I have the review posted and we will go over that before we start today's lesson. Okay, we start off in the simplest of terms. Remember, the cell is the basic unit of life, and there's two fundamental cell types, the prokaryotic and eukaryotic cell. The prokaryotic cell lacking membrane-bound organelles and a membrane-bound nucleus, and they have very simple DNA, bacterial DNA structure perhaps. The DNA is not bound by the histones and chromosomes and things like that. So in the eukaryotic cells complex, it has the membrane-bound organelles. They tend to be larger. They have more complex genetic material. Also, the prokaryotic are the bacteria. They're limited to two kingdoms, where the eukaryotic can be multi-celled, colonial, single-celled, and they have four kingdoms associated with them. So we're looking at that. And then the different kingdoms, cell type, lifestyle. So the kingdoms we're looking at are archaea, which are prokaryotic and a single cell lifestyle. They are known as the extremophiles, which love the anoxic or very hot or hypersaline environments. You have the eubacteria, which can be colonial, like the blue-green bacteria in filaments, or bacterial mats, or single cell, but they again are the prokaryotic cells. Then you have the other kingdoms, protista, which are single cellular or can be colonial. You have fungi, which can be single cell, but mostly multi-cell. And then you have the plant and animal kingdoms, which are multi-cell. The two domains are based around the prokaryote and eukaryotic domains. We discussed them as well. The kings play chess on fine green silk. What does that mean? That's an acronym for kingdom, phylum, class. Kings play chess on, order, fine, family, green, genus, silk, species. Now, a species is the fundamental unit of taxonomy. That means it's the simplest. Like the cell is the simplest form of life, fundamental unit of life. And species are defined as two organisms that can reproduce successfully. Plankton, benthon, and nekton are the marine lifestyles. Plankton means wanderer, literally, floating or using the currents to distribute. You have the phytoplankton, which are photosynthetic, the zooplankton, which eat. You have the meroplankton, which are just larvae, but they'll turn into something else when they grow up. And you have the holoplankton, which spend their whole life on the plankton, on the tides and the currents. Benthic, they are the bottom dwellers. They're the most numerous when you look at adults, although the plankton give them a run for their money, especially when you include larvae. And then you have nekton, which are the rarest. They're the larger organisms that can swim. So they're more complex. Cold water communities generally are more productive than the warm water communities because oxygen, nitrates, phosphates, and other nutrients and gases tend to dissolve easier in cold water. So cold water is more nutrient rich and oxygen ready. Chemosynthesis is the metabolism of chemicals, mainly sulfur-based chemicals like hydrogen sulfide, into the metabolism of carbon dioxide into the carbohydrates used for energy. Photosynthesis is a similar reaction, the metabolism of carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. It uses light, and it's far more effective. Red tides are caused by dinoflagellates. Dinoflagellates are kind of interesting creatures because they also can bioluminesce. They belong to the protist kingdom. Our local dinoflagellate is Carina brevis. They also, they produce this toxin because they don't want to get eaten. Causes eyes to water, runny nose, little hacking cough around these parts. Can be more severe in other areas. Different species have different toxins. The phytoplankton groups, I do have a mistake on this, my apologies. Radiolarians are not a phytoplankton, they are a zooplankton. The radiolarians are a zooplankton. But the dinoflagellates, cyanobacteria, coccolithophores, and the diatoms are all phytoplankton. Maybe my suspicion is I copied this from multiple choice, and one of the choices were radiolarians, and that would be a wrong answer. But the phytoplankton groups, dinoflagellates, which we talked about, cyanobacteria are the blue-green bacteria, colonial and filaments, coccoliths, and the diatoms. The main plants found in the ocean are, well, emergent would be the mangroves and the salt marsh grass, and submergent are the seagrasses. Now, don't confuse seagrasses with salt marsh grasses. They're totally different. The colors of macroscopic algae are the red, which would be Rhodophyta, the green, which would be Chlorophyta, and the brown, which are Phaeophyta. The 10% rule is the transfer of energy and biomass through a food chain. Please review that. Copepods are the most numerous arthropod animal, the most numerous crustaceans. They are a zooplankton, very common. Sharks control their buoyancy, interestingly, by using oils in their liver. They have huge livers. Everything's got to control its buoyancy. Sharks do that through oil, because oil is less dense than water. Nematocysts are the stinging cells of the cnidaria. Thermal regulation, we discussed the homeotherm, the and the poikilotherm. We also looked a little bit at the great white shark and how its constant swimming regulates its temperature, but it also fluctuates with the environment. So it's kind of like that hybrid in between way of thermal regulation. Bioluminescence, the creation of light chemically inside of a body, mainly bacterial. The bacteria are symbiotic in many organs of fish and things along those lines that bioluminesce. And the majority of deep sea organisms utilize bioluminescence. Mutualism, parasitism, commensalism, and symbiosis. Symbiosis simply means living together in a relationship where mutualism is mutually beneficial. Parasitism, one is benefiting, but the other is harmed. And commensalism, one is benefiting and the other is unaffected. Now, the animal phyla, David gave me a great question at the beginning of class, and some of you probably heard it, so there'll be a repeat here when we get to phyla Chordata. But first, the Porifera are the sponges, phylum Porifera. They have pores. That's how they get their name. They filter food right out of the ocean. Cnidaria is the second, Cnidaria with a silent C. They have those nematocysts, the stinging cells, 2 layers thick, sometimes with jelly in them. The jelly is called mesoglea, by the way. The polyp is the upright, like coral and anemones, with the tentacles around the mouth. The medusa is the floating planktonic type, like the jellyfish with the tentacles around the mouth, pointing downward. Although there is an upside down jellyfish that lives in the mangroves, this is a cool guy. It lays in the mangroves with its tentacles up, and algae grows in the tentacles. So it's a symbiotic farmer. It farms its own algae and uses the photosynthesis food where the algae have a protected stinger-full home. So they're kind of cool. They're the upside down or mangrove jellies. The Ctenophora, with the C again, silent C, are the comb jellies. They used to be in the same phylum. It was called Coelenterate. That was the old phylum name. It's been broken up into the Cnidaria and the Ctenophora. They do not have the stingers. They're comb jellies. There are some worm phyla. We'll kind of move to the important worm phyla, the annelids, the annelid worms, Annelida. They are segmented. There was also, we looked at Platyhelminthes, which are flatworms, nematodes, which are roundworms, and Pogonophora, which are the deep sea tube worms. We looked at those, but most worms that we encounter in the marine environment are annelids, segmented worms. And then the mollusks are the dominant shelled intertidal creature now. We did mention some of the ancient ones, the brachiopods, which were kind of cool, the stalked shelled creatures that really don't exist outside of a living fossil or two. The mollusks are broken up into the bivalves, the gastropods, and the cephalopods, with a few minor rare groups as well. Then we looked at the arthropods. which the arthropods are the most numerous on land with the insects, most numerous in the ocean with the crustaceans. There also is a living fossil or two in the ocean from phyla Arthropoda, the sea spiders, and the horseshoe crab. But they all have jointed appendages and segmented bodies, exoskeleton made of chitin. Then we have the echinoderms. The echinoderms are the sea stars, the brittle stars, the sea urchins, sea lilies. They have these tube feet. They're like water balloons, and they pump water in and out of their body. That's the blood. They use seawater for their blood, and they pump water. They can actively hunt. Interesting. One of the most voracious predators is the sea star. They crawl over the intertidal zone, eating away. They'll climb on a mussel or a clam or whatever, and they'll use the pump to pry the shell open, and then they'll distend, they'll turn their stomach inside out of their mouth and digest the mollusk right in the shell, and then pull it right back. So they're quite the predators. And they have an endoskeleton, and their larva is a little more vertebrate-like, so they are actually our closer relatives than the other groups, although five-fold radial symmetry as an adult is pretty basic. Then you move on to phylum Chordata. Now, David said, I noticed some characteristics of phylum Chordata that I don't have, and I seem to be a chordate, something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. But the dorsal nerve cord, which is hollow, is our spinal cord. It has the white matter, gray matter. So, it's filled with the gray matter, more of a gelatinous material. The notochord, that flexible notochord, is found in juveniles, develops into our vertebrae. We do have the subpharyngeal gland, the thyroid. We have the gill slits, the ears, the inner ears, and that's the gill tissue. In embryos, the gills are more pronounced, but as we grow, they develop into our ear. Cell specialization is a beautiful thing. We also have the post-anal tail. That is our tailbone. That stops developing embryonically as well, but as an embryo, it is quite post-anal. It's a little bit longer, and then once it stops, you get left with a tailbone, but you'll remember it if you sit down on a hard surface too fast. Believe you me, that tailbone can hurt. So we do have all the characteristics of chordates. A lot of them are just embryonic characteristics. But that's the characteristics of phylum Chordata, the most advanced phylum of all. So that is the review of marine biology. Oh goodness, when you read the textbook, there's a lot to marine biology. And then if you take marine biology, well, there's a lot more to marine biology. It's a lot of fun. It's a real great program, great class. Super interesting, but we're relegated to 2 weeks of marine biology and oceanography. Impossible to cover it all. But hopefully we did a good enough job so you have more to look forward to if you decide to continue in marine sciences. But that is the review for marine biology. The last unit is more of a human influence unit, where today we're just going to go over some general information, and then our last unit, the last one, we'll get a little more specific. Let's take a look at some of our environmental concerns. Now, I see these every time I go to downtown St. Peter, basically anywhere. So the old line, all drains lead to the sea from Nemo, is fairly accurate. Most of our ocean pollution comes from land-based activity. Obviously, we're land dwellers, and we're polluters. Most of it drains or gets into our waterways from what we do on land. As a matter of fact, 33% of it comes from the air. 44%, even more, comes from runoff or discharge, sewage discharge, things along those lines. So really, accidental shipping does account for 12% of ocean pollution, accidents, shipping. Dumping directly into the ocean, another 10%. Now this is not just America, because there's laws against things, but in other countries, there's different laws. So only 1% comes from mining, drilling, and oil extraction. When you study a pollutant, if you ever take environmental science, you'll study what a pollutant is, and it's studied in terms of quantity, obviously the amount, toxicity, some are more dangerous than others. The one that we tend to forget is persistence. You want a very toxic pesticide if you're killing pests. It's senseless to use something that doesn't kill. You want a strong herbicide that kills weeds. But you don't want a persistent pollutant. Persistence, how long it takes, remains dangerous. Something like DDT, which is famous for being used in the 60s, has a persistence of, off the top of my head, I believe its half-life is 12 or 15 years, but I'm not certain of the number right at the moment. But that's how long it's a half-life. I mean, really, it's dangerous for decades. So it has time to move through the food chain. It also has time to spread out, be transported elsewhere. So a persistent pesticide is a dangerous pesticide. You can use something more effective, but if it's only persistent for a week, it doesn't have time to move through the food chain, and it's easier to kill your target species. So persistence is an important consideration when you look at pollutions. We'll start off with the first, oil, petroleum oil spill. That image is from the 2010 Gulf Horizon accident. You can see right there's Louisiana, there's the Mississippi River Delta, and you can see right there is the horizon with its oil slicks churning off. There's the horizon, loop current pulling it in this direction. So the factors that affect the oil spill are the amount of oil, the characteristics of the oil. Now that's not all oil's equal. I mean, you would tend to think, yeah, well, you know, oil's oil, but there's different classes and grades of oil, different amounts of hydrocarbon, impurities. So there's differences. Also, the distribution of the oil, which you can see here, the loop current is moving it. If it's in an area that's got a lot of wind or storms going on, the distribution is going to be different. So there's a variety of factors that could go into how this oil is spread out and the damage that it does. Environmental conditions like current, wind, salinity, water temperature, shoreline, the type. When we were, I was training as a captain for Pinellas as the response to the Gulf Horizon. They employed private boat owners who have some experience in boating to combat this problem if there was a problem. Now, fortunately, there wasn't, but you know, in the training that we did, we learned we were distributing boom. Boom, you'll see images of boom is ways to block and channel oil. They float because oil floats. And we were aiming to direct the oil to the beaches. Well, That doesn't seem very smart, being most of our economy is tourist-based beach, but beaches are easily replaced. You can scrape the oil off the beach and then re-sand it. You would have to match the sand types, so you would limit damage on creatures and turtles and things like that. But beaches are far more accessible, far easier to clean than a mangrove estuary or a salt marsh. So the type of shoreline is very important as to the environmental damage that is done by a spill, the impact. Slope as well, because the tides roll in a gentle slope, and you may have more oil spread deeper inland than on a steeper slope. That's why we put sandbags up when a hurricane comes. We change the slope of the shoreline to stop the encroachment of a storm in some cases, or oil in this case. You would want to sandbag up the area so you can isolate it. The organisms, obviously larval, juvenile, and adult, would all have different tolerance to oil. So the annual amount of oil, let's have a peek here, make it bigger, has been declining since the 70s. You can see. So oil spilled from tankers is far less than it was. So we're getting better at mining and pulling it. Still, we're looking at 3.25 million metric tons hitting the oceans on a yearly basis. Now, the difference between crude oil and refined oil. Crude oil is directly from the ground. Refined oil is generally more deadly because of we separate out components and add other components that process the oil. So a refined oil spill from a tanker would be far more deadly than a crude oil spill. But what happens to oil? Well, the first thing you see is evaporation of the volatiles. Volatiles are things that go gaseous when they come in contact with air. So that oil changes immediately. As soon as it's released from the ground, all the things that could be airborne, it's no longer under pressure, so they go airborne. A lot of hydrocarbons or toxins go airborne. So your oil immediately changes its constituency, its constituents. Then the light can oxidize the oil, break it down a little bit. Also, anything soluble in water will go into solution. So your oil gets thicker and eventually turns to a tar-like substance. Now, that film of oil gets transported by currents or wind. And then eventually, though, the oil would harden into tar balls and sink over time because of the oil. Now, refined oils, well, you might not have the tar balls form as well because you put in emulsifiers to keep it in the liquid form. You would also get more, oil and water mixing because of the emulsifiers. So crude oil not only has different detergents and things in it that would make it more dangerous, but it also has different properties to avoid tar balls and allow it to be more soluble in water. So just depending on the type of oil that is spilled does have an amount of impact in what happens afterwards. Much like rocks weather, we call the breakdown of oil into its tar balls eventually weathering as well. So oil weathers. The evaporation, then the oxidation. Some organisms can feed on oil, so there's biodegradation. The stuff that dissolves out is emulsification. And all these processes lead that oil to becoming tar ball and sinking to the ocean floor. There's some boom right there, but our typical responses, this is a shot from the Gulf of Alaska up in the Exxon Valdez, a very famous tanker explosion in the 70s. Here's your booms. Okay, oil, less dense, floats. These stop that flow of water. A storm comes, they're useless. The wave will go right over it. But these are how we channel water and pollutants into the area you want to. First, you have to contain it, and booms are laid. They're not very deep. They're like 6, 8 inches deep. Not deep. I mean, they're not chained to this floor of the sea. They're just deployed to stop the flow. Around the back end of the clean blooms, and you can't do this for a lot, but you use these slick lickers on the back of booms to absorb whatever gets through. And then you can squeeze the oil out into a collecting bin. We experimented with dispersants, spraying chemicals onto the oil. We experimented with controlled burns. Both of these did not meet with much success. Basically, all you can do is contain it and then clean it. Here, you're seeing the rocky beach being cleaned after the spill. Bulldozers will scrape off the top layer. The rocks were sprayed with hot water. Dispersants were used. Clean it up. Now, the Horizon, the Gulf Horizon accident, here's the Gulf Horizon, is the most famous. Happened in the Gulf off Mexico, as you can see. April 20th, BP, British Petroleum. Explosion, caught fire. Initial report said the environmental damage will be minimal. 11 workers were killed. And 1.7 million gallons a day were spewing into the Gulf. They had to dig in a relief well. Relief wells were to pump the oil away from it while they could cap it. The problem was, we're looking at, deep water. Very difficult to get to it, but eventually it was capped off and the relief wells were dug and the oil was rechanneled. And our greatest fear did not occur. The oil tarballed up before it could reach the Gulf Stream. And there was no hurricanes that blew it into the coast of Florida because that loop current, if you remember, the loop current goes around and then rejoins the Gulf Stream through the Straits of Florida. And in a worst case scenario, it could have done all that and hit the whole west coast of Florida, around through the Keys, and then caught the Gulf Stream. Fortunately, it was contained before. No hurricanes pushed it into the coast, and it tarballed up, although there's still environmental damage. The Exxon Valdez, very famous one in 1989. The Exxon Valdez is an oil tanker, and it slammed into Bligh Reef. There's a bird covered in oil. Devastating. Had a great economic impact. Exxon had to pay $2.1 billion for cleanup, and over 1,300 miles of coastline was impacted. The second class of pollution is toxic waste, all right? Petroleum and oil spills, when there's toxic waste, chemicals that are entering the ocean. The most famous is the pesticide DDT. DDT was not used in the marine environment. It was used on land, but entered the marine environment, food webs through, runoff, precipitation, dumping. It's absorbed by plankton. It has a long half-life. So the plankton build it up, does not get metabolized. Then the organism that eats the plankton may have 1,000 plankton, so it gets 1,000 microdoses. And that's called magnification. So now your next step up the food chain has more poison concentrated in it. You may eat 10 1,000 dosed small fish. Now you have a 10,000 dosed large fish. And then your bird may eat 5 10,000 dosed large fish. Now you have a 50,000 doses of DDT in your particular bird. So we were finding this DDT in human breast milk even. So it moved all the way through the ocean food chain and started entering humans as well. That's persistence. It remains dangerous for a long time and causes great problems. Biomagnification is the growing of the toxin as you move through the food chain. Our response really was to, we started the EPA, the Environmental Protection Act. More disasters like Love Canal was just one of them, but a bunch of environmental disasters were piling up from our past bad behavior. So we started something called Superfund, which was a bunch of money aimed to protect, not protect the environment, to pay for cleanup when we ran into these problems. The money now would seem puny, but back when it was enacted, it was a lot of money. So here's an example of how DDT builds up in the food chain. You can see it's only, how many zeros, parts per million, then it builds up in plankton, and then it builds up in your small fish, and then it builds up in your large fish, then it builds up in your birds. And this DDT was causing birds to lay really thin eggshells because it was inhibiting their calcium intake. And the eggshells would crack before the babies would be born. And so we saw a marked number of seabirds, including the bald eagle, which really hit us in the fields because that's our national bird, but become endangered. So chemical pollution, you can see, is every place. You're not going to escape it. Every place on the coast has terrible chemical pollution. The one I grew up dealing with is heavy metals, and that's not the rock bands. That's lead, mercury, copper. I grew up in an area that used to have a place called Allied Chemicals, and they used mercury. So most of my lakes had mercury in them, and they would issue rules. You could only eat like a quarter pound of salmon per month, so you wouldn't build up mercury in your body, or you weren't allowed to eat fish from certain lakes that were polluted. And you knew you couldn't, you couldn't eat the fish. Heavy metals are very persistent. They don't go away. Now, over years they get sediment and whatnot, but generations have to pass before that water becomes safe again. The problem with heavy metals is a lot of them cause damage to our nervous system or other internal organisms or organs. I apologize. Something new on the scene is radioactive waste, because we've been using it, nuclear weapons power, since the 40s. We don't have a lot. It doesn't create a lot of waste, but the problem with radioactive waste is persistence. You're not talking decades, you're talking millennia, thousands of years for these to become half-lived and other persistence problems. So, every form of energy has its problems, and nuclear is the persistence of pollution, not the quantity. Very low quantities, very persistent. We've talked about eutrophication. Eutrophication is, here's the dead zones. Pardon me. Associated with fertilizer. So the fertilizer fertilizes the ocean, allowing plankton and algae to overgrow. When it dies, the bacteria of decay rob that area of water, of oxygen, and then the area becomes unlivable. We call that a dead zone. Now, currently, we are number two. We're number two. The Baltic Sea is number one. Number two in the dead zone. Now, climate change, it's only believed that climate change is playing a role in the northern Pacific Ocean because of oxygen depleted water. Here's a fish kill from a dead zone. And the coastal dead zones around the world are given in this area known as episodic, annual, persistent. The Black Sea dead zone was the largest until the Soviet Union collapsed. When the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 2000s, you don't want this to happen. The farmers in the country went bankrupt and people were starving, but they couldn't afford the fertilizer. And when you weren't fertilizing, the dead zone disappeared and the species all recovered. So dead zones are proven to be reversible. That's what's happening in Tampa Bay. We have actually reversed the dead zones in Tampa Bay. Seagrasses are thriving, and many of the species, including scallops, are returned. Sewage causes eutrophication. Here's an image, sewage treatment plant, and you hit the current, and the current pushes it up here. So your eutrophic zone's up here. You get sediments, the sludge. Sewage is a problem. We don't have a magic water fairy. Everything you put in the toilet goes back to the environment, just the way it is. And we drink it again and again and again. We use the wetlands for bioremediation. So you flush the toilet and basically that water leaves your house, enters city water, and is taken to wherever the sewage treatment plant is, and it's left out in retention ponds. Could have oxygen bubbled through. What you're doing is you're using bacteria, bioremediation, to digest out all of the nutrients. Then the water, is run through a series of the ponds, and that sludge is scraped off. It's returned to a wetland after it has been tested for nitrates, phosphate levels, things like that. Then the wetland further bioremediates that water. And then eventually it's back in the environment. I mean, that's just the way it goes. That's why you can't dump toxins down your sink or in your toilet, because there's no bioremediation for poison. You just, it get back into the water. So there is no water fairy. What you put down your drain comes back to you eventually. Now this is a shot from Asia, but look, garbage, the great garbage patch in every ocean. All the plastics that don't sink, they float, and you have different types of plastics. And they all are accumulating in our ocean gyres. In the weed lines, you're getting poison. Deep sea fish, you're finding plastic in their digestive system. Deep sea, bottom of the ocean. So there's nowhere that has escaped our filthiness. Thermal pollution, you might not think of thermal pollution as pollutant, but those towers that cool off our energy plants change the temperature, and that can suffocate organisms from the overgrowth of algae. we did talk about the greenhouse effect a little bit, but okay, let's start with one. Sunlight comes to Earth. Most of it's filtered out in the atmosphere, upper atmosphere. The ozone layer takes care of UV, because there's all different wavelengths, but it's filtered by our atmosphere. So only about 50% of the light reaches Earth, and that is mostly visible light. Visible light travels through our atmosphere, the others are blocked. And it heats up the Earth, and then when the Earth cools, because it's heating up during the day, cooling at night, infrared escapes, cooling off the Earth. Infrared is a longer wavelength of light. We have to have carbon dioxide and other things, water vapor, whatever, to trap some of the heat, because, you know, with a sterile atmosphere, it would be impossible for life, because there just wouldn't be warm enough. It'd be too cold. But if you have a lot of carbon dioxide or other what we call greenhouse gases, too much heat is trapped, making it hot AH. Think about your car when you get in your car and it's like 30 degrees hotter than it is outside, and your steering wheel, which is black, maybe 80 or 90 degrees hotter, and you touch it and you're burning your hands and you're going, oh my God, what the heck? Well, that's the same thing. The buildup of these greenhouse gases, as they're termed, oxides, anything you burn produces an oxide. Respiration produces oxides. Methanes and other natural gases trap heat, lesser degree, but they're still there. Water vapor acts like a blanket. And we're seeing the temperature rise because of all of the human activities, in addition to the natural ones. So our temperature's rising and our climate's patterns are changing because of it. So the greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide's number one with a bullet, methane, nitrous oxide, and now deforestation also contributes to that, because the trees pull carbon dioxide out. They also help shade the ground, so heat builds up less, so you have less of that infrared light. But when they're gone, our ambient temperature increases and the carbon dioxide increases. So we're seeing the temperatures rise consistently because of our activities. Now, they rise and fall naturally. That's not an argument. It really isn't. We go through glacial periods, interglacial periods. We've been stable since the Neolithic Revolution. Actually, most sociologists, paleoclimatologists agree that the Neolithic Revolution is when humans learned to farm, had permanent settlements. Part of it was because there was land to settle. We weren't in an ice age. The climate was stable. Wasn't too hot, wasn't too cold. It was just right. We lose that balance, and society's going to have to compensate for decreased food. And, you know, I don't know if we're very good at compensating yet. So the Industrial Revolution has created a dramatic rise in carbon dioxide, and that is the concern. Now, there's other side effects like the increase in sea level or sea level rise. There's a limit to that. You know, once all the ice melts, sea level is not going to rise. And, you know, there is a limit to that. Of course, it's going to be very, very expensive to deal with replacing these coastal cities that'll be flooded, like most of Florida would be flooded. And our climate will change because there will be no, why will the climate change? Well, obviously the temperature is going to rise. Also, though, there's no ice caps moderating it. Currents change because now there's no northern and southern ice cap generating that cold current flow. So really, we don't have a lot of empirical data to predict what changes will occur. So, you know, we have speculation. But the ice caps are thinning and sea level is rising. Here's an image of Florida. If the Western Antarctic ice sheet collapsed and 17 feet, all the area that's underwater here is less than 17 feet high sea level. So here in Florida, we have a special interest as to what happens to sea level in these ice caps. All right, take a look at this. This has always been cool to me. Okay, here's the Neolithic Revolution right here. You can see boop, bumping population. Population nearly doubles. Now, agriculturally based urban societies, population maybe up another third. The plague knocks us back. Look at that divot in the plague. This is called logarithmic growth. This is called the lag phase. Organisms display it. Take an ecology class. Humans are organisms. We display it. The amount of time it takes for a human's population to double is called doubling time. We study that for all populations. Here, we enter what's called exponential growth. And we're still in it, although we may see some signs of tapering off. Now, there's two things that happen to living things. They either reach a carrying capacity, that's called an S-type curve, and they hover around that carrying capacity, and whatever limiting factors are there, be it space, be it temperature, be it nutrients, they stay in that area.
First time I saw him with the seat on, we were just laughing about that.
What was that?
I don't know, deep down he knows I still make the calls back home when we're together in the summer, so he can be the captain for his team, but he's got me on that, so I'm not the captain of mine. So, but he knows who's captain in the summer. It's probably my mom, honestly. So, but,
somebody's got to do me a favor and go mute. Ah, sounded like a good conversation though. Okay, and now we're in this exponential growth. Two things happen. You can level off or utilize all your resources and you collapse down to extinction. Really, that's the only two choices. You wind up with a stable population or your population disappears. And that's because your resources go away, whatever that limiting factor is, limits. I'm not going to predict on what is going to happen in the future. This is just simple biology. Well, that concludes our environmental concerns lessons and the brief review of the marine biology. Any questions? Chandler, I see that you're not muted. Do you have a question?
Oh, no, I'm all good. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. David, I see you popped in. Do you have a question?
Yeah, could you say a few words about slide 39, ozone depletion? Is that bad or good, or comment on that?
All right, ozone. Ozone is O3, it's a form of oxygen. It sits in the stratosphere and it stops UV light, okay? With UV light, we get skin cancer. If UV light was too strong, life on Earth would be impossible on land. In the water, it's okay because the water would block the UV light, but on land would be impossible because it's too destructive to cells. So we discover refrigeration, which uses CFCs, chlorinated fluorocarbons, and aerosols, which we use CFCs for in the aerosols to pressurize. And we use them it's less dense than our atmosphere. It floats up, reacts with the ozone, and now the ozone doesn't block UV light. We start noticing, especially in Australia, we start noticing an increase in skin cancers. And, climatologists that study the atmosphere notice a coincidental thinning of the ozone. When we study, we find out that it's not really coincidental. They are actually in conjunction with each other. So we have a problem. We're depleting this ozone layer. The United Nations gets together and pens what we call the Montreal Protocol. Montreal Protocol was an international agreement written by Dr. Noel Brown. Fortunately, I got to work with Dr. Brown on ocean acidification projects some years later when I was working with the United Nations. But it was really kind of cool. He was an awesome dude. And he was from Malta. This was the only UN joint environmental action that actually worked. We eliminated the use of CFCs, moved to a viable alternative, vacuum emptying air conditioning units and refrigerating units and stuff like that. The ozone layer has recovered and the world is saved, I guess, for lack of a better ending. So the ozone layer is very important in stopping high energy radiation from making it to Earth. Ozone in the lower atmosphere, however, could trap heat. So you need it in the stratosphere. You do not want it in the troposphere. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, very excellent. Thanks very much.
You're more than welcome. Anyone else have anything? Well then, have a great day, and I will see you all on Wednesday.
Bye.
Bye.
I had a couple of not super relevant questions.
All
This is
right.
Artesia. So, I forgot what the study's called, but there was some study on like rats, and they had rats and they were provided with like all the food and shelter and stuff that they needed. And so, they went through this like period of intense growth, and then like all of the male rats ceased having like a reason for living and stuff, and then just the population went extinct. You know what that's called? Or do you know?
I do not know.
Have you heard of it?
No, that is something that I've not heard of. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. I think you know how China enacted their one-child policy?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I think that was supposed to be like they knew about the policy and then they decided to enact the one-child policy to prevent that from happening. And then at some point there's this place called the Beautiful Ones, like within their while the rats were reproducing, they just became like super obsessed with the way that they looked and stuff. And there are some questions about whether or not like gay people today are our version of the Beautiful Ones. I don't think so. I mean, I feel like we have more complex desires in life than rats, but at the end of the day, we're all organisms. So that's the article.
Okay.
But I just
Well,
thought that it was really
appreciate it.
interesting.
I'll give it a look.
Yeah. And also, so given that you have, studied environmental science for a long time, is there any real answer to this aside from just like everybody living on small communes?
No, it's not going to work either. There's no
No?
answer. I mean, if you want honesty, it's not. We got 8 billion people and we're full.
We are? But I mean,
Well,
we
8
throw
billion
away
people
food.
is, I mean, what's the carrying capacity of Earth? We're artificially sustaining our crops. There's no way you could naturally grow and feed all the people here. We have to have monocultured and fertilizers. We've passed the threshold where you could feed this population naturally.
But we like throw away food and stuff, don't we? Isn't a lot of it like artificially done because we need capitalism?
Well, I mean, you know, we throw away food, but we don't have a distribution network either.
Or what, could you elaborate on that?
Well, a lot of food is thrown away because of spoilage. We don't have a distribution network to distribute to these poor nations and get food there that would be healthy and nutritious.
Well, I mean, we have food deserts within America, though. I mean, even within St. Pete, people have difficulty based on like how much money they have to get access to vegetables and stuff.
Yeah, but that's all. I mean, you're talking about humanity in general or just a city? Because there's a big difference between feeding
Yeah,
and feeding, you know, 10 million people in Mexico City that live in a open sewer.
I see.
Feeding a country like, you know, in Africa that has no arable land and no climate to grow things, and feeding that entire nation than solving the problems of some homeless people in a city. And that's not callous and against the homeless people.
Yeah, yeah.
That's just reality. So I'm talking about the survival of the species, not the, you know,
Mhm.
saving a city. So, I mean, we're over 8 billion people on this planet, and China's in the middle of an industrial revolution. India, I mean, there's billions of people in India. I mean, you know, our problems are big. They're big.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not, you know, we don't want to minimize our local problems, but you know, the global answer is, you know, 8 billion is just probably too many.
But we just have like so much farmland in America, at least.
Yeah, we do have the most productive farmland in the world.
It just seems so like weird that there's not an answer to that. I mean, I guess maybe vertical farming? I mean, do you grow any of your own food?
No, I don't.
Hmm.
No, I go to the store.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I got, you know, got 3 kids, grandkids, full-time job. Wife's got a full-time job, you know, live in a regular neighborhood, just don't have, you know, don't have the means to do that.
Gotcha.
Maybe
Yeah, I'm
tired and, you know, but that's, you know, that's in the future.
yeah. Can always get a papaya tree as long as you're not in like an HOA place, but
But, you know, I mean, our problems are more population driven than anything else at this point. The sheer vast number, the amount of waste, 8 billion people, and the amount of food, 8 billion people, the pressure put on our oceans, the pressure put on farmers and all the pesticides and nutrient pollution stuff is really, really unfathomable. And then you look at the climate and how it's going to be shifting due to the carbon dioxide, and that's our big problem, not necessarily you know, the smaller one. And I'm not saying that, you know, they say think globally, act locally,
Mhm.
but I don't want to throw cold water. But if we don't get a handle on the carbon dioxide, it's not going to matter. I mean, it'll matter to them people, you know, individually, but all, you know, we're in trouble in other ways too. The humanity in general is in trouble.
Yeah. Do you think there's like one, or like, do you think there's like a series of decisions that would be the best overall for the world? I mean, I'm kind of interested in like urban planning and stuff, and I've heard about like the 15-minute city where everyone can bike or walk to everything they need within 15 minutes, and that sounds like it would cut down on emissions a lot. But do you know if there are any, you know, generally agreed upon ideas?
I mean, those are all great ideas, and they would work if you get the world to agree, but that's going to be tricky. I took urban planning. It was fascinating, so much fun, and design and all that. And we do, we have technology that could buy us time. Really, really do. But if we don't stop exponential growth, we're just buying time. If exponential growth stops, we have technology that could make us sustainable, and that could happen. So I'm not saying we're going to be extinct by the year, you know?
Yeah.
I'm saying that if you look at current trends, then though, I mean, those are the only two options. That's what happens to a species. They become sustainable or they go extinct. I mean, those are the only two possibilities. And right now,
Gotcha.
not either, we're in exponential growth. So, you know, I mean, I don't know. You know, 8 billion is a lot of people, you know,
Yeah.
be 9 billion. When's it going to be 10 billion? Are we going to level off? What happens when our foodstuffs collapse if, say, climate changes and our land's not arable anymore? You know, I mean, there's a lot of factors.
Yeah. Do you think that or how much of an impact do you think the like American ideals of like materialism and like the 40-hour work week, how do you think those factor into things? Because it seems like, I mean, with the insanely low cost of living based on what it used to be like pre-2000s, and you know, people used to be able to survive on a one family income. I live with my girlfriend and we can afford a 2-bedroom apartment, but I mean, it's gone up like at least 100% since we moved in here a year and a half ago. So things like that. I mean, we don't really need 40-hour work weeks anymore to maintain the same amount of productivity that we have. And it seems like the rich are just getting richer while the rest of us are left to spend money on entertaining ourselves while keeping ourselves like relatively okay in like the free time. And to me, it just seems like, and you know, obviously I don't have any formal education on this. It's just like news and TikTok and whatnot, but it just seems like maybe not having the 40-hour work week and lessening the impact of like, it's just, you're seen as being like a better person in society if you have more stuff. I feel like a lot of the companies that are doing the polluting kind of capitalize on that. What are your thoughts on that?
Population. I mean,
All right.
yeah, I mean, really, 40-hour work week, 30-hour work week, rent being high, medium, the amount you eat, they're all first world problems.
Yeah.
We're looking at billions of people, you know, with a B, not eating or not, you know, that China, look at the pollution problems in China. Still burning coal. You know, I mean, it's all a factor. I'm not minimizing what you're saying, and
Yeah.
you know, capitalism has its pros and cons. But what are you going to go? You know, you're not going to have a utopian society.
No. Why not?
Gonna happen. So, you know, if you go look at the closest thing to a commune that has worked are the kibbutzes in Israel. But
What?
Kibbutz, they're communal farms.
Okay.
But I mean, how, you know, it's just, we're not really wired for that as human beings right now, you know. It's just, I don't really have an answer to your question. I think smarter people than I have tried to figure out how to set humanity straight, but you know, you can only do what you do, try to educate and work towards a better future. But you know, the problems are big. China, India, Mexico, they're all you know, I mean, it's just, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. There are a lot of other factors.
There are. So, you know, your thoughts are great. I don't necessarily know if 40-hour work week is dooming humanity. Maybe consumerism hurts quite a bit, you know, but those, you know, it's a big number of factors too.
Yeah, it's just such a shame. Like the people with the most money just, Jeff Bezos, what, like went to
Yeah, he's
space?
just one guy. I mean, he's not you ruining the world.
He's not.
Nah, he's just a guy. He employs a lot of people. He doesn't pay a lot, but it's one guy. We're talking 8 billion people. One guy
But
in charge of the whole world.
yeah, but when you're talking about like carbon dioxide emissions, like I'm over here faithfully cleaning my recyclables and taking them out to their recycling and trying to reduce my waste, and he emits how many tons of carbon dioxide?
You shop on Amazon?
Sorry?
Do you use Amazon?
I try to use it as little as possible. Now I just use it for
But
face
you
masks.
do, so.
I do.
So when that's how, but is Amazon bringing your products to you cleaner than you driving back and forth to the store 10 times?
Well, I've decided that like no.
Well, yeah, but
They're not.
but is it? I mean, is one truck driving around all day delivering to 500 people more environmentally responsible than 500 people going to the store 17 times each?
But is everyone
You can, you can say he's doing this and that, but is it less, if the Amazon distribution center, is that less than all the material being trucked to every different city by individual companies, and then all the people leaving their house and going to different stores to pick them up?
do you know if there are any studies on that?
I don't know. I mean, I really can't claim to
Yeah.
have all the answers, but I know that you really can't blame one person or one company. Why do people use Amazon? Well, it's cheaper. So are you going to blame salaries for Amazon being successful? Well,
No.
yeah, but in a way they are. I mean, why do people shop at Walmart? Because they want the business, or because the products are cheaper?
I understand, but like the companies themselves is not the issue that I have. The issue is that like they're underpaying their workers and like significantly impacting their quality of life. Like, McDonald's, great place. I ate there a lot when I was younger. Not super fantastic health-wise, but they're good. They provide fast
Right, right.
food.
But is it
but,
the
like,
company's responsibility to fix the problem? Or is it the city's responsibility to control rents? Or is it the landlord's responsibility to invest their life savings to an apartment building, but then lose it because you lower the rent? I mean, it's not just the wage, or it's not just, or is it the foods industry to responsibility to provide low-cost food? Or is it the workers' responsibility to go to college like you are and get a higher paying job because they put in the effort and worked 2 or 3 jobs and paid the price for 10 years, say, and then got themselves in a position where they only had to work 35 hours a week, or could afford what they wanted on one salary? So, I mean, it's a whole myriad of things.
But you don't think like Jeff Bezos has so much money that he could like single-handedly solve so many problems?
Not really.
That's
The
the
problem,
issue.
money doesn't solve the problems. I mean, you could throw money at, look at school districts. You throw, all we do is throw money at them, and we don't solve any problems. I mean, what's he gonna solve? I mean, he provides a lot of jobs. If he paid his taxes, he'd also provide the government.
Yeah.
It's not his responsibility to feed the world. And
No?
wanted to, it's only money. It's not, I mean,
Yeah, but there's people dying
individual.
because he doesn't feel like sharing his money. To what, buy another super yacht?
Well, it's his prerogative. I mean,
And you think that that's like morally just? That he has more money than like, I think recently it was like, if
I
you
don't
made
judge other people's morals. I that's not what I do. I try, you know. They provide a lot of jobs, they provide a service. The dude made a lot of dough. A lot of people made a lot of money. You know, you look at religions, they make a lot of money.
Oh, they do.
Am I gonna go against religions too? Look at England. England owns more land than any place else from colonization. So I'm gonna hate a whole country. I'm gonna spend my whole life hating everyone. And my life's too short to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a different perspective.
I do what I can, and you know, I mean, I do, you know, I've got an environmental education, worked at the United Nations, did a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, I can only affect my behavior. I can't change your behavior or anyone else.
Mm.
So I'm not going to spend my whole life mad at everyone, because that's just a waste of my life.
So instead you spend your life doing things that make you happy. Not that that's like a bad thing, obviously, that's what everyone wants.
I try to strike a balance. I mean, I do things that I feel are good, like, you know, I come to work and work with guys like you. Or I also, you know, do things that make me happy as well. And I can't judge other people. I mean, dude's rich. What would you do if you were rich? Would you give it all away and live in a 2-bedroom apartment in St. Pete, or would you live a little better? Then someone could judge you.
I mean, I like to think that I would still try and live a modest life and improve the lives of the people around me.
I live in a compound. Be on the ocean too. I have a few boats. It'd be fun.
Compound. What is?
Probably in the Keys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh no, I mean, I don't know. I would try and form my own commune, and you know, I mean, right now I'm applying to jobs for the city of St. Pete. I mean, right now I make like 50,000 a year.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, like I could retire off of this, but this, I mean, I work in technology. This kind of sucks. Like I'm trying to, you know, to your point, other people, I mean, yeah, I was definitely brought up by people who are like live enjoying their lives. So
well, you gotta strike a balance, you know.
yeah.
I don't want to run people over either. And you want good, but you don't want to wind up hating half the people on the planet. I mean, that's just, who needs all that negativity all the time?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I thought it was cool that he shot a rocket up. Most people didn't, but rockets, I mean, shoot a rocket up. Space is an awesome place.
It
And
is.
you contribute to the knowledge base. At least he wasn't spending it on like a big party on a yacht doing blow. Rocket's kind of cool. And yeah, that contributes to our knowledge base as humans. You know, entering space, that's something that I'd like to see us do. Not necessarily take a joyride, but it wasn't my money, so I can't really tell the man what to do, you know?
It just, at the very least, I mean, I'm taking American government at the same time, and apparently when they went to Tallahassee, there was one of our representatives, congresspeople, I don't know, one of the people that represents the state of Florida started telling the students about how we can take pictures on our phone boxes now.